This incident took place in Florida in 1981. The weather was unexpectedly sunny and warm. A Buick or Lincoln was moving leisurely along the road to Fort Lauderdale. It had been a long time. Now you wouldn't know exactly which car it was. Behind the wheel sat an ordinary 60-year-old man, accompanied by his 48-year-old mother-in-law, the owner of a voluptuous figure and fiery red hair. In the back seat, his lawfully wedded wife slept peacefully. Despite his fatigue, Mr. Johnson kept his eyes on the road, occasionally glancing at his mother-in-law's lap. She was wearing a short summer dress, one leg swung over the other, allowing him to admire not only her knees, but something else as well. Mr. Johnson had long been attracted to Kimberly, and he felt no shame for that desire. He still considered himself young, fit, and full of vitality, able to charm both women without difficulty. The difficulty, however, was that his mother-in-law had strict and old-fashioned principles. Nevertheless, Mr. Johnson firmly believed that beneath her appearance lurked a passionate soul, just waiting to be ignited. After all, she had been a widow for 10 years and had not experienced the touch of a man, so she was ripe for caresses. Kimberly gazed out the window at the scenery with her brother-in-law, not concerned with traffic safety, but rather remembering her past. It was here that she had met her first love, a trucker named Thomas, with whom she had shared a special moment of her life on the beach. The memory of him sent a slight shiver down her spine and a pleasant warmth in her stomach. They were heading toward a spot near Fort Lauderdale where they planned to camp for the night. While Kimberly and her brother-in-law were immersed in their thoughts, Brenda, an accountant at a small firm, was sleeping peacefully. Brenda was dressed in a tight dress that fluttered in the wind, and her sandals were neatly spread out on the floor nearby. Despite the limited space in the car, she had managed to find a relatively comfortable spot for a good night's rest. A sudden jolt from a pothole made the car shudder, and Brenda opened her beautiful green eyes. She reached up, fixed her bright, stiff hair like her mother's, and sitting back in the seat, she said, "What a wonderful sunshine. I can't wait to get to the place to sunbathe and swim. I'm already tired from the road. My legs are stiff." "I don't think we have far to go." "You're absolutely right, dear. Another hour and we'll be there. You don't know what a wonderful place Mr. Johnson is taking us to. My mother-in-law always called her son-in-law that out of respect, and you'll soon see it and fall in love with it. Besides, there's never anyone there, which means we can completely relax and get away from the hustle and bustle of the city." The car turned off the main road and onto a rural path decorated with lush vegetation, typical of the southern region. After a while, our attention was caught by a blue flashing light signaling our arrival at a secluded and idyllic cove sheltered from prying eyes. Exhausted from the trip, the tired travelers finally got out of the cramped vehicle into the fresh air. Brenda lay down on a sun-warmed boulder, gazing dreamily at the waves rhythmically crashing against the shore. Meanwhile, Kimberly got food and drinks out of the trunk, fulfilling her role as a caring mother and mother-in-law, keeping the family fed. Scott immediately set about setting up a large tent that would accommodate the three of them. The untouched but incredibly cozy spot was beginning to take on a cozy ambiance. The tent was closer to the surrounding trees, and the smoke from the fire was gently billowing nearby. The kettle was making an inviting puffing sound, and there was even a rope strung up to dry the laundry. It was evident that the travelers had made a serious and prolonged stop here. Seizing the first opportunity, the women left their duties to their host, and, happily throwing off their dresses, rushed out to bathe in the sea. Mr. Johnson, keeping an eye on the soup, watched with adoration Brenda's and Kimberly, who were splashing merrily in the waves. Although he had been married for 2 years, the man was still pondering why this fiery-haired beauty had chosen him, given his age. However, it was undoubtedly his incredible charisma and charm that captivated his wife's heart, making her fall in love as a young girl. The wedding took place a few months later, and even his mother-in-law was thrilled to have such a wonderful and economic son-in-law. A few minutes later, Brenda emerged from the water and reclined on a towel, warming her young and graceful body in the warm sun. Her mother-in-law, on the other hand, didn't seem to have any intention of giving up swimming just yet. Meanwhile, Kimberly grabbed a large air mattress and eagerly went back out to engage in a prolonged battle with the waves, seeming to be sucked into the maelstrom for a long time. And decided to take advantage of hungry for female caresses son-in-law. Without wasting time, he approached his wife and began to caress her in the right places, from which her cheeks flushed and a smile appeared on her face. Then he took her with him into the tent. After a few minutes, distinct sounds came from inside. Unfortunately, they had to hurry as they could be caught at any moment, but the excitement and adrenaline rush made this activity even more exciting. However, their efforts to remain inconspicuous proved futile. The worried mother-in-law, noticing that there was no one on the beach, decided to check if everything was all right. As soon as she approached the tent, all her worries instantly vanished. Through the sunlit fabric of their shared dwelling, she saw her daughter and son-in-law in an unmistakable pose. There was no longer any doubt of their actions. What she saw and heard made her uneasy. Struggling with her own desires, the woman decided not to reveal that she had witnessed their game. She quietly withdrew to the shore and tried to cool her ardor in the refreshing ocean water. A few days later, however, a happy accident helped Kimberly find a solution to her loneliness and dissatisfaction. It was like this. Mr. Johnson had gone early in the morning to replenish the groceries in town, and Brenda had opted for a leisurely stroll along the shore. Kimberly, suffering from a headache, stayed in the tent. She covered herself with a blanket and dozed off. Unfortunately, Mr. Johnson's plans were disrupted when his car began to malfunction on the way to the store, forcing him to turn back and deal with an engine problem. Upon returning to the campground, he discovered that the woman was not at the beach. Peeking into the slightly ajar tent, he saw dainty toes and decided it was his wife and took the opportunity to slip inside. As she dozed off, Kimberly suddenly felt a hand slide down her thighs and heard her son-in-law's voice. "Surprised to see me back so soon, darling?" "I missed you," he whispered. At first taken aback, Kimberly succumbed to the pleasurable touch of her son-in-law's skillful hands, forgetting everything else for a moment. Overwhelmed with pleasure, she could only whisper, "Scott, what are you doing?" Momentarily stunned, the son-in-law hesitated before resuming his caresses, gradually breaking Kimberly's feeble attempts to resist. Eventually, the mother-in-law gave in to the urge, willingly giving in to the forbidden game, agreeing to everything.